Andrea, hi. Ellie, Adrian, glad you could be on this call. Right on. Thanks everybody for being on this call, for joining us on this Monday afternoon. Good afternoon. Um, really excited to have everybody here and still a few more people trickling in. We're really excited for this call and for this incredible panel that is has been so and is continuing to be so generous and gracious with their time and emotional energy and thoughtfulness and all of it. I'm just going to do a brief introduction and then hand the microphone over. My name is Matthew Young. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm the founder of Art of Freelance and a photographer and director. For anyone that doesn't know Art of Freelance, we are a online workshop for creative freelancers that happens twice a year. Spring and fall, we'll be launching again in the fall. We encourage you to check it out. We are also a community of freelancers here to support each other. We've been doing these road ahead calls since the beginning of COVID, just as a way to sort of build more community and try to bring together industry experts to answer some of these hard questions that we've all been grappling with through this. I think that I am probably not alone in the experience over the past few weeks of feeling like I've always tried to make myself an ally. I've tried to be, actively inclusionary in my life. And yet I realized that there had been a big sort of deficit in my actions and experience. I've been sort of blandly not racist my whole life, I think, and not really been vocally anti-racist. And in the wake of George Floyd's murder, like millions of Americans, I started taking a lot more introspective look at my actions and my opportunities. And the first thing that came to my mind was holding the space and offering it up to a panel of people to sort of have this conversation. So I also didn't want to put myself in the middle of that conversation. This conversation is a lot about sort of decentering white voices and recentering conversations around communities that have been historically marginalized. So I didn't want to be the moderator for this. And thankfully, we had a good friend, Maceo, reach out right around that time, asking if we were thinking about doing something like this and offering to moderate it. So really grateful to Maceo for being willing to do that with us today. And I also just want to give a special thanks to all the panelists, but especially Jovel from Authority Collective, who helped bring together all of the panelists. I had reached out to Authority Collective since they were doing such great work in this space, and she was great about putting together this panel with us. So just want to acknowledge Jovel as well. And without further ado, I am going to pass the microphone off to Maceo to introduce himself and the panelists to introduce themselves, and then this conversation can get going. Just a little bit more housekeeping. The chat box is a great place to say hello, say where you're calling in from. If you have any questions, we will get to a Q&A a little bit later. Just quickly, the format of this, we're going to do this panel for about 50 minutes, and then we're going to invite everybody to go to these breakout rooms to have a small conversation amongst just a few people. Maceo will give us a little bit more context around that. And then after the breakout rooms, we're going to come back to this main room for Q&A, and that will be the format for the next 90 minutes. Once again, thanks everyone for being here, and Maceo.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Matthew. I think it's a really good way to get things started in terms of, a lot of people not knowing how they want to show up in this time. And I think that's a large part of why myself and the other panelists are on this call. I think the first thing that I would like to do is just name that the people on the call, the panelists, they're not just Black people, people of color. They're also people who understand this work and these dynamics. So there is a difference between just asking any for an opinion or experience of racism from a person of color or a Black person versus, talking to people who work in the space, who educate, who've done readings themselves, who've taken a more critical approach to the subject matter. So you are able to give the subjective experience, but also that critical analysis. So thanks everybody for coming. I'm really excited to be here and help facilitate the conversation. The first part of it really is introductions. So as I see it, we should maybe just go in the order of the flyer that I have. And that would be like maybe the easiest way. And then the respective panelists can, go after that. And then we'll take it back to myself. The first person up will be Kelly, and then Polly, and then Jovel, and then O. And I like to take it modernize the ASL, age, sex, location. And for this, we'll do NPL, which will be your name, pronouns, and location. So Kelly, would love to hear from you and give us a quick little bio about how you're coming into this space personally, professionally, and geographically.
Okay, hi, I'm Kelly Marshall. I am she, her. I live in New York City. I am an editorial commercial photographer. I'm also on the board of Color Positive, which was started by photographer Jay Leonard about 1.5 years ago, amplifying Black talent, but also starting a mentorship program with New York high schools, select Brooklyn and Bronx high schools, to mentor the next generation of creative talent here.
Hi everyone, my name is Polly Irungu. She and her is my pronouns. Normally I'd be in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm coming to you from my mom's place in Norman, Oklahoma. And I am a digital editor at New York Public Radio, also known as WNYC, and I work on a show called The Takeaway, and I started Black Women Photographers.
I think it's me next. Hi, everyone. My name is Jovel Tamayo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in Seattle, Washington, where I'm an independent visual journalist. Yeah. I also co-founded the Authority Collective with Oriana and other brilliant folks who continue to inspire me and inform me how I navigate this industry till today.
Hey, y'all. Quick note, if you aren't speaking, so that way we are not accidentally prying into personal conversation, make sure to mute your mics. My name is Oriana Corinne. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm located in Los Angeles. I am a photoethnographer, a writer, and a historian.
Oh, good. The timing of these bios, as the producer in me is like, yes, we're on time. So I'm excited about that. My name is Maceo Keeling. Some people know me as Maceo Paisley. I'm an artist, behavioral economist, designer. I run the nonprofit organization Citizens of Culture, where we use art to develop emotional intelligence and critical thinking in organizations and communities. So a lot of the conversations I have center around very contentious topics, and we try to find a human place to meet in the middle to discuss those issues. So the next little bit here is going to be naming the problem. And the way that we're gonna approach that is we're gonna open the floor for the panelists a little bit to we'll go in reverse order of the order that we just went. So the panelists know what that is. And what the question is, when somebody says, or the prompt, so to speak, if you could, tell us a little bit about how here's some ways to approach it, how the past few weeks have gone for you relative to how the past, X number of years have gone for you in your life. Speaking to the combination of COVID and a sort of mass awareness of the phenomena of Black Lives Mattering. So let's take a little bit of time to contextualize the issue around our personal experience with living in the bodies that we inhabit and trying to do the work that we do. And I'll remind you all the order, but oh, you're first.
Yeah, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. So I was in Vietnam in March. I was there from March 4th through, I think, the 18th or the 19th, shooting my third cookbook. And by the 15th of March, I lost all of my work for the year. Not that there was a lot of work piled up to begin with, but the few commissions that I did have were gone. I travel primarily for a good majority of my work, so that was completely out of the question. And I wasn't actually anticipating having a very good year this year because I had some incredibly outrageously racist incidents happen on 2 back-to-back sets last year. And in fact, the increase of racist and queerphobic behavior has correlated directly with our current presidential administration. And I don't think that those things are accidental at all. All that to be said, I was not thinking that I was going to be doing much work this year. And I figured that I would essentially kind of have to start from scratch, and that is rebuild clients, because it's hard to work with clients after you call them out for any form of misbehavior, but especially racist misbehavior. By the time I recognized that this year was essentially done, that there was no room for making plans, I had reached out to a handful of friends of mine because I got really concerned about how freelancers were going to be treated, especially monetarily. And that email was me saying, hey, let's all get together with all of our organizations, come up with some form of an open letter to advocate on behalf of freelancers getting paid earlier. That email then turned into a Bill of Rights project that just launched a couple of weeks ago. So something has been in the air, something was in the air. I couldn't really articulate what it was, but I was definitely feeling that we were in the midst of a really significant shift. And I just kind of let that feeling move me into the direction of writing the bill, and now into speaking more frequently again about what it's like to navigate the racism and the queerphobia and sexism in this industry.
Awesome. Next in Jovel, would love to have you speak. And also for the audience, listen for areas where your own personal experience aligns with what the speakers are saying, and listen for areas where your own personal experience doesn't align with what the person is saying.
Thanks, Maceo. Yeah, I think since COVID, like kind of just to go off what Oriana was saying about this organizing we've been doing, I think like what the pandemic has created is this space for folks to come together, because a lot of us aren't working as much, or we, lost certain opportunities. So there was this space to dedicate toward doing something even more. And, I think about how we founded the Authority Collective. And for folks who don't know the Authority Collective, it's an organization that centers the experience of women, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people of color within the visual media industry. And we founded it in 2017 because we wanted to push for progress that was beyond like the performative diversity initiatives, which we're seeing a lot of, again, like in the past, few weeks, past month or so, and also to really like validate the experiences, our own experiences and the experiences of our like community and colleagues. And that organizing came out of this shared frustration and this wanting to protect each other because nobody else was going to do it for us. And, I know we're all impacted by injustice in different ways, but I think something we wanted to do with Authority Collective is really focus on the people who were most aligned to, or most like pushed to those margins, as women of color, as queer and trans folks of color, and folks with other, different identities who just aren't platformed in the same way as white men. We wanted to create space for that. And it's been really difficult. And I think the thing that this moment has really led me to realize is that people are still asking, like, what can we do about this? Like, what is the next step? And that's frustrating to hear because people who are asking these questions probably know already what the answer is because a woman of color, a person of color has already told them. They've already done the work, to educate and to share what needs to be done. And I just wanted to reference really quickly this Roxane Gay tweet from last month, I think, where she said, like 10 years ago, I was writing these lists of writers of colors for editors who are saying they couldn't find writers of colors. And today we're still running into that problem where editors are still having trouble finding these writers, but they're readily available and ready to work and fully competent. And it makes me wonder, like, are we still going to be making these databases? Like, there's such incredible work being done by Women Photograph, Diversify Photo, Equity at the Table, Color Positive, so many organizations that are led by people of color specifically to do the work. But like I just don't want us to end up being in the same cycle. So yeah, I'm not sure if that fully answered your question, but I just wanted to throw out all that out there. And I think it's really important to just, because we're going through this moment, like I hope that we don't have to repeat the same things we're seeing today, in like a couple months, especially with the leadership of folks like, in the 30 Collective with Black women photographers, Color Positive, the lit list that O created. There's a lot of things happening and there's no reason for the same mistakes to continue.
Am I next? I just want to echo what you're saying, Jovel, because I think that is so important. This time next year, I don't want to hear the road ahead. I want to hear about the results from the road ahead. I want to know how you all, when we get into the solutions part, I want to hear, a year later, how you all implemented those solutions and took those steps. But for myself, my role as a digital editor at WNYC is the takeaway. Normally it'd be, just living online, pitching, editing, finding stories, finding diverse voices for our radio program. But I can't talk about WNYC without mentioning the fact that we're having our own reckoning right now. I'm sure a lot of you may have seen the article in the New York Times, and so on top of my day-to-day, I'm in committee meetings. This past week, I took the week off for my birthday. I just celebrating myself, took a week off, and I still ended up being in meetings to talk about our next steps internally. Even tomorrow, I'm going to be on another call, and so we're doing all this. Black and brown people usually have to take on this unpaid labor on top of whatever their day-to-day may be. And so for me, I just felt my body taking that toll as well. We don't talk about the physical, stress that can be on our bodies. And so I've been trying to find a way that, as, everyone's having this kind of reckoning, whether it's, internally for us at WNYC or external, I've been trying to figure out what I can do to, even though it's not on me, it shouldn't be on me or anyone, my panelists to figure this out for this industry. But here we are. I still feel the burden to do something and speak up and be about the change, and rather than just like tweet away, like I tweet often, I tweet delete often. But rather than doing that, what can I do? And so part of that is, I'm thankful that I have a full-time job with, union benefits. So even though, as like Oriana mentioned, she's not having any work, I was like, what can I do? I have that privilege. And so I started a COVID-19 relief fund for Black women photographers, in the US and globally. And actually, while you all are here, I'm going to plug it. If you feel inclined, I dropped it on Juneteenth. And since then, I've raised more than $10,000 for Black women, from PG County in Maryland to Lagos, Nigeria. And so for myself, I was like, okay, this is one way for me to, provide a solution, right? Because I have my job, I have that cushion. I know I can't work, and I know I'm able to not work. And so that's one of the things I've been doing in this time, while also helping with our own reckoning at my organization.
Thank you, Polly. And yep, Kelly, you're next.
Hi. Well, I think, oh, it's such a heavy question. I've been in the business for about 15 years and on the commercial side. So I think for a lot of my career, I've been really living under the radar. As a Black woman working in the commercial sphere, you're just not really seen. You're ignored, you're passed over. I feel like I'm always working 3 or 4 times harder than everybody else, building community, building initiatives, networks and testing and doing all the other things everyone else is doing all the time. And, when the Photo Bill of Rights came up, I was just so anxious to be part of changing this, my photography industry, where it is completely unrealistic for us to push these financial burdens on on ourselves, and the future photographers, and the unsafe spaces that are created in a freelancer world, which are completely unregulated. That's a big problem. On sets, there's no accountability, there's no human resource. And so I hear so many terrible stories from, my assistants, things that happen. And so I really want to address that a bit. And, because I have a little bit of a longer standing in the community, when all of this happened, I was flooded with work. But it was like, how many people have to die for us to have careers, for us to be working? And it was just it's just wrong, So I think that that's something that's been really emotionally troubling. And then the inherent bias element of the field. We're like, oh, wow, you're really good. I'm like, yeah, of course I'm good. It's like, there's been a lot of things about technical expertise, your business, the social elements, what's happening in your career and socially. And so it's just such a layered thing. But for me, my priority was about, we got to change this industry from the bottom up. We have to be more holistic. We got to take care of each other. We need better communities, and we just need to change everything. That's how I feel.
Yes, so solid. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. What I'm hearing is a couple of different things. One, there is a kind of conflict, at least one of the early parts of what was shared. O mentioned having to do this work of confronting racism, but feeling even resistance of acknowledging that it's happening. This idea that maybe racism isn't a real thing, that it's just so, nefarious and unconstructed and obscured, that it's just everywhere and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, so the first thing is we want to find a sense of agency in the conversation, a sense of agency around and within this milieu, within the force, what we're calling racism, we're calling discrimination. So that way we can actually address the issue instead of feeling helpless about it. And what that means and the second thing that I heard from everybody was, there's this additional work you have to do on top of whatever your professional expertise is. So every human being that goes to work has to put on their, professional drag, if you will. You got to bring your equipment. You got to have your sort of whatever safety or professional attire that you need to wear, whether that be steel toe boots or just your business casual. And then if you're a woman of color, if you're a Black person, fill in your identity group. But in this particular case, we're talking about also having to bring a kind of like racial armor, additional strategic organizing lens, an ability to navigate really, really tricky conversations and power dynamics where your personal livelihood is on the line, where you can be harmed or lose an opportunity for responding to harm in a way that's deemed inappropriate by the person that harms you. So just to create context, that's not an easy burden to carry when you're already trying to perform at a level that allows you to continue working in general. The next piece of it that a few people brought up was that we already have a sort of job insecurity. We already have this question of, am I going to have a good year? Do I have enough work? And Polly was lucky enough to have healthcare and benefits. But one of those things is the reckoning that's happening with WNYC is there's an actual entity in which that reckoning can happen. So with Kelly, there's no HR department. And many freelancers know this, that you don't have a structure necessarily to go in and say, well, yeah, well, this was just a producer that was on a job who is somebody's friend who is brought on or what have you. So there isn't an organizing body that you can necessarily leverage in all cases to hold people accountable. And so these are some of the keys that obscure the problem, that remove our ability, that make us feel, and this is going to Polly's point, that make us feel like we don't know what we should be doing. That we see these lists of names, and you know, the other piece of it is how many had never heard of those names, Authority Collective, you know, and so forth, where there are 100% resources and full lists of people of color and Black folk and women of color and non-binary, like all identity groups. These folks are out there and those lists have been created. So one of the key pieces here is recognizing that, hey, you know, we've been working really hard to win back our sense of agency, our freedom as oppressed people. And when we say, you know, when someone who hasn't says, what can I do? It almost is an attack of its own. It's adding salt to the wound, because we've already created the list. We've learned how to, as Polly did, modeled graceful ways to make asks and drop links and drop hints and communicate, hey, this made me feel uncomfortable. And so all of that adds to a tension and a pressure that individuals carry with them when they go to work. So the first part, I think, is human, acknowledging that this is a dynamic that's ubiquitous, that extends outside of job sites and job relationships, but is 100% compounded by the experience of living in resource economic uncertainty and scarcity, and how that compounding can produce even further additional harm, stress, and because there is disproportionate resource and opportunity distribution, when jobs dry up across the board, then that means jobs dry up even more for Black women, for people of color, et cetera. So that's just my sort of reframe. Is there anything that I missed that the panelists want to hop back in, double down on, or after hearing the other speakers, they want to endorse or drop some notes on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I was really excited to do this panel was because I think that part of the reason we're in this place again is because we keep having the wrong conversations. We're not having the right conversations, right? The issue is not just that this industry is exclusive, and it's not just that people in the margins get forgotten and lost. Why is that? What are the conditions that create an industry like this? And to my mind, you know, I think we have to all of us very, very seriously think about the fact that we live in a country with an ideology that is violent and dangerous. That ideology is white supremacy. That doesn't mean that white people are the problem. It means that the ideology by which they abide, whether they are conscious of abiding by that ideology or not, causes these sorts of issues. It causes people like me to be murdered in the street. It causes people like me to not be able to succeed. It causes people like me to be stuck in generational poverty. So we have to kind of have a conversation about the real enemy, and the real enemy in our industry right now is white supremacy. That is what keeps us separate from each other. That is what makes it impossible to engage in good faith with one another. So then the question is, as an individual person working in this industry, how am I working every day to confront and dismantle white supremacy in my life? If you can figure out how to do that, then you will regain the humanity that has been lost by participating in such a depraved and violent ideology, and then you can connect with other human beings. But until that very, very important idea that everyone you are working with is a human being, and as such, they all deserve to be treated with equal respect and dignity, we cannot actually eliminate any of the problems we have in our industry, because that is where it starts. It starts with that. Yeah, absolutely. Any other panelists? I don't want to talk after everyone talks, so you all
just hop in and add pieces if you feel like you need to.
I mean, someone said preach and you were preaching, because it's true. And I guess I just want to know if everyone who's attending, like, does everyone understand, what Oriana was saying with that? Because if not, then we're going to be repeating this again and again and again, and we shouldn't have to. There's too many resources out there. There is just too much, we're here, but this is beyond us at this point. At the end of the day, if you're not checking your own privileges, if you're not calling this out, if you're not having those uncomfortable conversations with yourself, with your friends, with your family, then we're going to be doing this again. And I don't have time for that.
Right.
I would also challenge the folks in the room to think about what it means when you have freelancers who live financially precarious lives doing essentially the work that a majority of you are supposed to be doing. It's unconscionable to me that in the last 5 or 6 years, the people who have built databases, the folks who have disseminated assignments by virtue of just walking away from one to give somebody else a chance to try and realize their dream. Like, these are not the sorts of things that should be required of us as freelancers, but they are required of us because we understand as people of color that if we don't do this work, we cannot do the work, period. There were 2 or 3 years of my life where I wasn't getting assignments because photo editors were assigning me. I was getting assignments because I had friends who knew that I wanted to work, and so they would pass work off to me. That's a huge sacrifice to ask someone to make when, that assignment could mean the difference between them paying their rent for the month or not. There's never been a moment in the 12 years that I've been working that I've had any form of financial security. And I need people to sit with that, because my reality, that's the reality of a lot of Black and brown people working in the industry. It's the reality of every queer and trans person working in the industry. We are constantly in a state of precarity. And even in that state of precarity, we are still able to show up and do the work that is required of us. But we shouldn't have to do it under extreme duress all the time. Like, can you imagine what the work could look like if we weren't working in a industry that was so precarious, and if our colleagues fully supported us, and if we knew that we had an industry to rely on, the incredible sort of work that we all would be able to make. I think about this all the time. It's really, really frustrating, like, conversations that I'll have with people, and having them primarily, or editors, I should say, because they are not thinking about these things. Like, someone reached out to me a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. They wanted me to shoot a portrait out in Antelope Valley. 2 Black men were found lynched in Antelope Valley a month ago. This woman didn't know that, but she wanted me to go out to risk my life between white supremacists and a plague to go make a picture for her. And I had to be the one to say, hey, please keep in mind that right now it's a dangerous time for any person of color to be working, but specifically for Black people. We have an actual target on our backs right now. And if you're not careful and you're not doing the research to even figure out, like, where is this in relationship to LA? Is this actually going to be a safe place for me to send a freelancer out? It has to be if you want to get your pictures back. But, this is work that I've been doing for 5-6 years now. And every time I have to do it, I'm just shaking my head wondering, where is the disconnect? What exactly is going on, that a good majority of the work that it takes to make a good commission, that work is being put on the shoulders of freelancers. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
I want to echo real quick something off of O said. I mean, O has been preaching, so I hope everyone's taking notes. But I work at WNYC, as I said, and this moment, this is the first time I was asked if I want to shoot an assignment, and that was after the fact. I was looking at our own practices, inspired by Daniela of Woman Photograph and how she always does her weekly breakdown of gender practices. And I wanted to see what our breakdown was. We're in New York City. There's a plethora of Black photographers that, and people of color. And I was looking at our most recent coverage, and we hired the same white man photographer to do like a 20+ gallery 3 different times. And I'm just like, we're in New York City. Why is this the case? Why can't we expand? Have we ever hired a Black photographer? And before Diversified Photo put it together, there was like the spreadsheet that was passed widely of like 300+ Black photographers from across the country that was covering protests on the ground. So I sent that to an editor in my newsroom as a resource, and I said, hey, I was looking at our own coverage, and I haven't seen us hire a Black photographer. Can you check this out and hire someone? And then the editor asked me, do you recommend someone? I'm like, the resource is right there. I didn't respond because I had to take a step back because I didn't want to, regret what I said because I love the editor. But it was perhaps maybe the editor not realizing what that meant, how that could be interpreted as asking me to, recommend someone when there's already a resource right there and all you have to do is already fed to you. So just do a little bit more homework, look through, see what you want and hire someone. Sure, I could recommend, I know plenty of friends that are shooting on the ground, but at the same time, I know they're being bombarded. I know that some of them mentally, they don't even want to be shooting. So I don't want to make them feel bad for, turning down an assignment. And so I just didn't respond because I was like, that's the work right there. That's already been done for you just to do it, the next step. And then like a week later, the editor followed back up with me and told me they hired 2. And I'm like, I want to applaud that, but at the same time, it's like, that's the bare minimum, right? And that was the only time I was asked if I wanted to photograph something. Other times I had to pitch myself, and I'm a freelance photographer, pitching myself at my own newsroom. So, there's a lot of work to be done. And so I need everyone here, realizing where they have been complicit without even realizing.
Yeah. One of the key things that I wanted to highlight as we move into this next section, we'll be talking about what are the solutions. So just to clarify, what we're talking about is the intersection of structural racism with a competitive, job uncertain, precarious, capitalistic industry, right? And also how that intersects with the individual professional and personal responsibility to show up and deliver services, products within that. And so one of the things that helps we're going to do, or what I would encourage people to do is, as we're listening, like I said, listen to where your stories align with the speaker and listen to where they diverge. Because there are areas where, hey, everybody's a freelancer. This is a very difficult dynamic for us all to navigate. Great. So let's not use that to separate our narratives from, this isn't about race or gender. We are all actually operating within this precarious climate. And then looking back at your individual experience and ask yourself, okay, though we are, and we can acknowledge we're living in a precarious climate, have I personally had to worry about rent and food this year, as opposed to a more general worrying about bills or finances? There's a very different kind of stress, right? And so, and think about the last time, if you've been in the industry for a while, think about the last time you've had to worry about that. Even the panelists will differ in their answers on that. And this is why we're talking to more than one person. So the assumptions that we make, they have to be backed with a spirit of inquisition, a spirit of empathy, and a spirit of service and support for us all. And then looking at those areas where individuals who are more marginalized, more at risk, how can we provide additional aid? Because they're already doing additional work. The other piece about it is there is a parallel job role. Everybody on this call, which we've heard as we were talking about in that first piece, every one of the panelists on this call has had to master their professional skills to the extent that they're hireable. And then they've also had to become organizers and facilitators on top of that. So when you're talking to someone who, even though they may be pitching themselves as a photographer with, maybe not as much photographic experience as someone else, understand, one, why that might be, And then two, understand that not only are they bringing the particular technical skills of being able to capture an image, but they're also bringing a very particular kind of cultural, social, and political knowledge that helps them capture the image in a particular way. You're far less likely to capture a racist image if you have a sense of racial awareness and if you've been living with a racialized lived experience your entire life. So one of the things that we do when we call out brands for their, putting out these images that perpetuate ideas that devalue Black life and people of color and tokenize and frame individuals under harmful contexts, is we're saying, hey, you could have avoided this, one, by hiring someone that has a different and additional and kind of expertise. There's a cultural and social awareness piece that obviously comes with creating imagery and content for the world. And that is one area where you can identify gaps in your contact book, your contacts themselves, and say, you know what, it's interesting to me that I don't know Black woman photographer. Why would that be? If you're a photographer, you should know all kinds of photographers. And the other piece about it is when you're considering, just as you're asking someone to go do a shoot during COVID, you're asking someone to participate in a racialized climate. So there's a risk factor there. And so one of the things that I want to go back to as we move into solutions was Polly mentioned that she's trying to also figure out at the same time how to build self-care and rejuvenation practice into her daily life just to be able to focus. And so again, when you're looking at massaging and recuperating from the daily stresses of the world that we all have to go through, imagine the layers of trauma and of harm and of difficulty and of challenging in a day that you already have to shake off. And then think about how your colleagues, and that's a really important word, we are all individual freelancers, but we are colleagues in an industry. Think about how your colleagues in the industry might be dealing with a greater burden, and how by supporting them in carrying their greater burden, we lift, the rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak, where by helping the most marginalized in the organization, things actually get better for everyone. So I want to go back to this idea of what do I do? I would love to have the panelists spend a quick second, it doesn't have to be like too short, but 3 sentences, just restating what it is that you have created in response to this, and what you do for your day job. Because the key here is that if we want to be allies, if we want to be supportive, this is something that we have to internalize and adopt for ourselves, and look to our left and right, look at our skill sets, and not ask someone what can I do? Because frankly, if you ask me what can you do, I don't know what your skills are. I don't know what your knowledge is. I don't know what your connections are like. I don't know what your resources are. But what I can do is help onboard you to a more holistic way of thinking, and I can help onboard you into a more progressive and equitable way of operating in business as a mindset. But how you actualize on that information is going to be unique and particular to each one of your identities, skills, resources, relationships, etc. And again, using these individuals as models, they've already had to do that. And that's a bit of what causes the frustration, because there seems to be that, you have to learn how to organize, and you also have to learn how to be a photographer. You also have to learn how to exist, while there's another group or other groups who have to worry about less of those concerns. And we like to use the Black body as a model for leadership, and the Black femme body as a model for leadership, because they're they're already our society's survivalists, and they've already paved the way for us to see how to carry both with grace. So if you could just sort of remind us in a quick little, 20 seconds or what have you, I want to be generous. What is your sort of day job, so to speak, or even if this is your day job, and then what is your organizing project or a number, how have you engaged, just so that people can see how you've adapted your own skill set and your identity position to this work? Because the creativity that it takes to come up with that solution is not a unique thing. The answer that you come up with is the unique thing. Let's go with Kelly.
Hi. Okay. So actually, I want to kind of go back a little bit and talk about one other thing that came up.
Absolutely.
Was when we're talking about like, why is this happening? There's a thing that, to kind of touch on what Oriana was talking about, the foundation of America, is like, we are still considered the other. And there would be no America without Black America. We are part of the framework, the essence of this nation, building along with indigenous, like everybody who came here to build this nation. But yet we're consistently put on the sideline as this problem or this thing people don't know what to do with. And I think that somehow translates a lot of times when editors don't know what, like, I like working in February, love working for Black History Month projects, great. But it'd be great also to be considered all year round. And I love working on projects that are deeply aligned with my goals and my community. But I also love being considered for projects that are just interesting, cool, not race related, or just humanity related, all of these, like design, technology. We are not a monolithic culture. We're not just about one thing. And I think that that's often forgotten when people, I think that's part of the problem when people look through lists like, oh, I need a Black photographer because I have a Black assignment. And I think that's still happening. And I think that's a big part of the framework in our industry. For me personally, I mean, I am a jack of all trades. I love doing all kinds of work. And I think really what I've really been dedicating my time to in the last few years is doing work around the maternal health care crisis, which I don't like to call it that any longer. I've been working on a project for that for a few years now. It's a documentary and that's in development. And what I found out through my research was there's this legacy of Black women healing our own communities for a really long time, generations. And that's something that today not a lot of people know about. And so for me, I still do work that's profoundly intimate and affirming, but I also love shooting product and traveling and all of that. So I think that's how I manage my career, because I think as artists, you're always changing, you're always evolving. And you should never stop that, and you should never be pigeonholed. And so now, my work is now becoming more film-based and also installation-based, and we're everything now. We're being asked to do it all, and I think you just have to keep pushing your own boundaries and keep doing the advocacy work. But the race stuff, all the other stuff's gonna fall where it falls.
Let's go with Polly. Quickly, name of your sort of professional practice and how you've organized. Take a few seconds.
Yes, professionally, digital editor, WYC's The Takeaway. Outside of that, started Black Women Photographers, a new community online, in a database of Black women photographers to complement the efforts that are already out there. And I started a COVID-19 relief fund as my own solution piece to help, the people I've seen that are out of work or mentally can't work. Or I've been talking to a lot of different women, and one even has MS and she's immune compromised. She uses a walker. So all these different things, covering protests are for able-bodied people and just different things that we don't think about. And so that's my solution.
Awesome. JoBelle, if you want to go next, that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm an independent photographer, and I do mostly news assignment work. And in terms of organizing, I mostly organize with Authority Collective, and now we're working on the Photo Bill of Rights. And something that Oriana said earlier just reminded me of this concept I think about is, what is the work you want to do versus the work you feel like you have to do. And I think for me, it's always trying to find that constant balance of, getting to do the work I want to do while also taking care of the work that I feel that I need to do. And I'm really grateful for all of the community and friendships I formed through organizing. But at the same time, I kind of want other folks to share that responsibility of organizing, and also feeling that, I guess just like sharing the responsibility will lead to us all being able to share the benefits or share the opportunities within this industry if we can all, kind of identify our own privileges and leverage that in order to make this a more equitable industry for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A couple of things. So I was one of the founding members of Authority Collective, and then I founded the Lit List. I've been mentoring for the last 5 or 6 years. It's not something I advertise, but it's something I love to do because I was very lucky that people mentored me, and I recognized pretty quickly how that lack of mentorship is one of the huge barriers for young photographers. And then I really just got lucky that I met a handful of people and they just decided for whatever reason that they wanted to siphon off information to me. And then I just started siphoning it off to other people who I knew needed it. And I'm also in the process of writing an ethnography around white supremacy. So that's all of the work that I'm doing in addition to sometimes shooting food and sometimes traveling for work.
Awesome. This next phase, y'all, we're gonna go into the breakout groups. I'll start by saying that if you're a person of color and you want to stay out of the breakout group, just reject the invitation to go into the breakout group and you'll stay in the main group. But you can also join the breakout group. So there's a prompt that we're going to address. I'll put it in the chat. There's a prompt that we're going to address with some things to consider. The prompt is for the breakout group is what might be some individual actions that address some industry-related symptoms of systemic racism. And by individual actions, we mean you. It's like, what am I gonna do? And this is not just for white folks, this is for everyone. So that's an important thing. But as you're looking into this question, we're gonna ask you, think about what is your positionality in the industry? What are your racial, socioeconomic, political, gender, educational identities? Did you grow up working poor and end up making it into college and now your career is fine, but happen to be a white male? Are you, what is your sort of social political makeup as it relates to this issue? Are you a Black queer male that went to a great school and the career isn't working out for some reason? How are you making sense of yourself in relation to these conversations? Partially because we want to tear down this idea of a hierarchy and realize that everyone has a role to play relative to where they are in proximity to different kinds of privilege. The next piece, yes, and definitely bounce now, so you don't have to bounce in the middle of the breakout group, because that would suck for your group members. But and then the next piece is, after you identify that positionality, then what are your areas of privilege? What do you have access to in terms of relationships, job opportunities, as it relates to that? And a quick way to look at it is to look at the industry in which you work, look at the bodies and the communities that have the most power and access to opportunity, and quickly ask yourself, how relative does your body seem in difference or similarity to those individuals? The reason I say this is because all systems are constructed, all systems that we engage with are designed. And typically what happens in design is designers seek intuition. They seek to build sleek design systems that don't require a lot of thought in order to engage with them, really simple. And that's beautiful, but what that means is that if your body, if your cultural framework, if your existence is more similar to the designer, you're going to have a better experience with whatever they designed. In this particular case, when we take structural racism and white supremacy, we mean that the people who designed our economy, our country, and our institutions are predominantly white, male, able straight bodies. And so if you fall outside of that identity group, then you're going to find increasingly more difficulty engaging with the design of that system because it wasn't designed to benefit you. And what we're talking to now is, as we go into this chat, is how can you be a member of a community who redesigns and innovates our ways of being, not only in our professional industry, but how that trickles out into our groups. So I'm gonna quit yapping, and I'm gonna put the prompt here again, just so that it's at the base of the chat. And then I think Matthew will invite folks to break out.
Yeah.
And we've eaten into the Q&A a little bit, but I think it's important that we get, the groups going.
So the breakout rooms will be actually a little bit shorter than 20 minutes. We'll give hopefully 4 people to a room. Some rooms might have 3 people. It does it automatically. You'll get a little invite on your screen right here. Just click accept, and you'll be whooshed to a breakout room, unless, like Maceo said, as a person of color, you want to stay in this room. And everyone in the room will get 4 minutes to share, sort of reflect on this prompt that Maceo gave. We'll ping you with sort of first person should be presenting, halfway mark, second person should be presenting, and so on. When you're done in your room, you'll come back into this room and we'll do Q&A. And we just really invite everybody to be honest, be vulnerable, be real, commit to action, take this as an opportunity to really kind of to be bold, be brave, and commit to something in this group. So you're gonna get a little ding on your screen right now, and just click accept and you'll be sent to a breakout room, and somebody volunteer to go first to kick it off. And like we said, there'll be four minutes per person. So about 16 minutes total if your group has 4. And then we'll all be back here for Q&A and more of this incredible panel. Great, it's working. Amazing work, panel, and we'll see you guys in 15 minutes. All right, thanks. I think people are starting to come back into this room. Is Maceo still in here? Hi, Yo. Hi, Kelly.
Hey there.
How is this room?
I don't know. I was gone for a few minutes.
Great. How is
I
the
had to-
bathroom?
had to readjust the fan actually in my room because it's so hot today.
It really is.
It's
Cooking.
unbearable, and we're still waiting to get an additional air conditioning unit that's coming in on Friday to help with the heat wave that's been happening here in LA. It's a lot.
Yeah, it has been hot.
It
no
really
doubt.
has.
Well, while people are wrapping up their breakout rooms and coming back into this room, we do want to leave space for Q&A, which is next. We've done pretty well. Props to Maceo on the timing. It's 1:20 right now. We wanted to have 15 minutes for Q&A. We still have about 10, and if this runs over by a few minutes, then I think that'll be okay. So for the people that are in the room right now, if you have any questions that you want to get a jump on the panelists tackling when people do come back into the room, I would encourage you to start putting those in the chat box. And I just heard the alarm for the 4th share in the breakout rooms. So I have a feeling that people will start filtering back in here pretty quickly. That was nice. People actually, people are reticent, and in our breakout room, people shared the sort of reticence, the sort of fear around joining a breakout room and saying the wrong thing and getting it wrong, and the committing is scary, and people were pretty bold and brave.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's exactly the work we all have to be set upon doing in this moment in time.
Yeah.
Discomfort is temporary.
Well said, as you usually say things. All right, so people are popping back in here from the breakout rooms. Thanks for joining those breakout rooms. Thanks for coming back into this room for the Q&A. Maceo, I see you there. I'll hand the mic back off.
So I'm here. We're gonna do a couple things. What I would like for you to do is type into your chat one of the things that you heard that was a great solution or a great activity, not the one that you said, something that one of your cohort members said in the breakout. Like, this is recall something that was like, oh, this is good. In my group, Ali said, naming the elephant in the room. How did we end up with all white people on this project? So I like that. So just type one thing that, if you can credit the person that said it, that's even better. But just type that in the chat. While that's happening, let's formulate some questions. We'll probably only take, probably a couple questions, and we'll give you a second to formulate that. I want to see what positive things came up in the chat, because this is your repository of things that came up from a brain trust of people on a call. So we'll just let that go for a second, and then we'll do 2 questions, and we'll give the panelists an opportunity to answer them. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna make an audible here, and I'm gonna put Matthew on the spot, because everybody is in their groups and they're typing their thing. I want the conversation to still happen on the chat where they're reflecting on it. Matthew, would you be okay with fielding one of the questions from your own group or from your own self, just so that part can continue to happen in the chat? Like, do you have a question that you wanted to bring in or that you remember reading that we could tackle for 2-3 minutes while they continue to share what happened in their group in the chat?
A question. So one of the things that was shared in our breakout group was the fear of joining a breakout group, of joining this call, of having this conversation, of being involved in this conversation and getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing, approaching it in the wrong way. And so I guess my question would sort of revolve around the permission to be involved in these conversations and sort of, obviously avoiding the question of tell me what to do, but sort of looking for your thoughts, any of the panelists' thoughts about how best to like step into this conversation and the fear around getting it wrong.
I mean, I think there's something to be said around this idea and this very specific fear of getting it wrong and of being wrong, because we're actually in a really interesting moment where there are a lot of adults who, for whatever reason, have never grappled with the idea that they could be wrong about something. And I think we have to understand that what we're all engaged in right now is really deep learning. So if we're engaged in deep learning, you have to be wrong sometimes in order to learn. You can't propose to think that you can open yourself up as a vessel to be educated and to learn if what you're more focused on is, am I gonna look wrong? And I think that, am I gonna sound wrong? Am I gonna say something wrong? Also digs into this really deep, insidious belief around being nice that white people like to dig into, that if I am just nice to people, whatever else I do, it doesn't matter. I just have to be really nice. There's a time and a place to be nice, right? And we can't conflate niceness, a politeness that is taught to us, with being a good and moral and ethical human being. And if you want to be a good and moral and ethical human being, you have to then know that you will be wrong. And in that wrongness, there is space to learn. I think that's the thing that we ought to be thinking about.
I want to add to what O was saying, because everything that they said was spot on. I want to say though, as well, I don't know if it's social media. Well, I do know. I think social media does play a role, but it's okay to not know. It's okay to say I don't know. That is not a foreign concept. That should not be wrong to say. Like if you are, wanting to participate in these conversations, but you don't know something, that's okay. Just say, I don't know, and just sit back, take a step back and listen, right? Because oftentimes you really have to, get the floor, if it's, whether it's giving the floor in your own newsroom to the Black and people of color, actually listening to them, hearing their experiences, seeing where you may have been complicit in that, or not complicit if you didn't do anything, right? That I think that's also important, but just saying that you don't know something and then realizing it's okay to not know, because hello, these are conversations that, for many of us, I mean, for all the panelists, I'm sure have been having time and time again, and that we want to stop having. But, for all of you, it's okay to first is to recognize that you don't know, and you don't know how uncomfortable this may be for you. You don't know until you do it. You don't know until you sit back and hear and listen. You don't know until you go, read up about what Kelly's doing, go read up about what Javel's doing, and then realizing, okay, this is where, where I can go from here. But it's okay to not know where you may go from this moment. Just listen to us and then do something.
I'd like to add to that also really quickly, action steps. It goes like learning a foreign language. It goes a long way if you've been like, hey, I read this thing and I'd like to ask more about it. Or I've done a little work on this because I don't know something, but I don't understand even more. So I think even just, we're doing so much work and we would love to be met even a few steps forward in that. And that'll help, I think, dissuade the fear around having uncomfortable conversations, because we're all showing up for them. And I think that helps.
Yep. And the last piece, I mean, this is a great question as our question. We only have like 2 minutes left. All that's great. And the piece that I add to that is consent. Do you have time and space to unpack this for me, with me? Where are you at in this? If you're not, that's totally cool. But I just want to check in because I'm learning Spanish. And if you're interested, it could be fun for us to speak in Spanish. I'm going to obviously that obviously means you're going to be teaching me Spanish, but if you have a little bit of that and you can extend a little bit, I'd be deeply appreciative. And I know that I'm gonna take it and advocate, and because I'm trying to be a better ally in person. And so and this is what we said on the call, I think beforehand, or at least I did, is that that's at least why I'm here, is that my hope is that by donating my time and investing in this group of people, that you go and be better, and it encourages you and it informs you to go ahead and do that. And so yes, you're deputized and you have been invested in by 5-6 people here who are really hopeful. Oh, you have a thought for sure, and then we'll close after that. We'll formally close after that, but go ahead.
I wanted to address this because it's something I've been thinking about, and I think it's a conversation we've all been having, and it ties into actions. There's a difference between actionable work that provides results and half measures that are kind of there to make you think like results are being provided, right? Mentorship is one part of the game. And I want for especially agents to hear me out clearly and to think really deeply about this. Mentorship is not the answer, full stop, 1. 2, in a landscape where there are brilliant Black and brown, queer and trans photographers, you should not think that a mentorship program that you are running so that way you can mold an artist into what you want to mold them in is the answer to then making sure that Black and brown people, queer and trans folks are included as it regards to representation. The third part of that is representation is a huge key to having a financially stable and successful career. So it's very, very puzzling to me that there are not enough Black and brown, queer and trans folks who are being represented. And it's also puzzling to me that the idea is just mentorship. We are not at a moment in time where nice words and nice gestures are enough. We are at the moment in time where power and capital has to be redistributed. So if what you want to do really is to help Black and brown artists succeed in this industry, do the mentorship program and start adding Black and brown artists to your roster. And I will challenge you and give you a date. By the end of this year, by December 1st, every agency that exists in this country should have at least 1 Black, brown, and or person of color and or trans and queer artist. That's your mission. You will have to figure out how to make it work, but this is us telling you directly, here is an actual actionable thing that you can do for us. Represent us, help us find the work that will allow us to move from precarity to actually being able to fully participate in this industry.
Yep. Yeah, and you opened up from the panelists' last words, any little things, 60 seconds. Thank you, O, for that. That was wonderful. Any little last thing, 60 seconds here as we close out. We're already over, so the producer and me is sad, but we're gonna do it. The human in me is happy.
I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel for showing up and taking time to be here and participate in this conversation. And to everyone who showed up and participated in the breakout panels, because that's really what we want, is for people to show up. This is the beginning. Obviously participating in this panel doesn't mean all the issues in your organization or individual practice are fixed, but we hope you really do feel inspired to, hold yourself accountable, hold your colleagues accountable, and really just to add to the homework that O gave is like, maybe you can share like a personal accountability statement or pledge that you want to take with you moving forward. Maybe we can send a follow-up about that. I know there's a really fine line between like a performative statement and like what you actually mean to do in earnest. But I think it can be helpful, even if you write this down privately in your journal, like what are you going to do beyond, listening and learning, but like, what are you going to do about it? But I am really grateful that folks made the time to be present for this conversation today. It is really encouraging. I don't know if we'd been able to have this conversation in the past, so really grateful for everyone.
Yes, I want to echo all of that. And I think one way to think about what they were saying is, to not feel overwhelmed by that. You may think, oh my God, like, okay, how can I do that by the end of this year? I mean, just think of it like how, when you're getting a new job, right? Or even when for the presidency, we always want to hear like in the first 100 days, what would that look like? Okay, in the first 60 days of my new job, this is what I set out to do. So think about it like this. You know, at WNYC, for our list of demands, we have in 100 days, we want 1, 2, 3, 4. So think about what are your list of demands for yourself, not for what we're telling you to do. Think about what you have to do, right? What O said, that is the bare minimum. 1 to 2, a sprinkle there, a sprinkle that, a black, queer, and trans, that's the bare minimum. Just think about your own, create your own list of demands. Take this whole week to reflect if you have to, of what everyone was saying, and think about in the first 60 days, 2 weeks we'll have a new month. So what are my goals, tangible, concrete goals for August, and then September, and then so on, for that way, we're not having this conversation next year. Oh, and one last thing, check out the Photo Bill of Rights that everyone there worked on. So sign on. Thank you.
Kelly.
Hi. What was I supposed to do? What was I supposed
Just
to say?
last words, last words, 30
I was
seconds.
so enthralled with what everybody was talking about. It was so great. Thank you all for showing up and being part of the conversation. Simply said.
Okay, awesome. Matthew, thank you so much for sharing your platform. Thank you everyone for hopping on board, for participating in the group chat. I would love to see what y'all get done in the next 60 days and be on the lookout for an email with information and links pertaining to this talk. And consider yourself, like I said, consider yourself deputized. The next 60 days are going to be really awesome. I can't wait to see the tidal wave of signatures and people being represented and naming the elephant in the room and all of the stuff that was said, because that's what's going to get us the baby steps in the photograph and creative industries that we need. Thank you again so much, Matthew and O and Polly and Jovel.
Thank you, guys. Wonderfully said. We got notes over here. Nobody wants to leave.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
Thank you. For the panelists, for the sort of aftercare email, I'll send you a quick email. Obviously, we have all the links to everyone's organizations and work, but I don't know if we want to have more of a conversation, if we want to leave a prompt there, what kind of action do you want to commit to in the next, 60 days before the end of the year, or if there's anything else, if you guys want to stay and talk about it, send something our way. We'll get the recording of this sort of sorted out and ready to go by the end of the day. We usually send an email towards the end of the day. So if there's any thoughts around that, then please share it. Send an email. Cool.
All right, y'all.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
Yeah, talk soon. Bye. Thanks everyone for being here.